Hello YouTube. I want to do a quick video in response to Anthony Riley's latest video effort. So I'm doing this as a live stream because it's quicker to do. It may not have quite the detail that Anthony might appreciate, but if he really wants to make the fuss about this, then I will hopefully do a more detailed video later. Let's get on. So Anthony produced a video just yesterday, which is entitled "Flat Earth, Ireland from England? Explain this with evidence." Then, and in the description on his video, he says he invites people to make videos to debunk his video because he has disabled comments, so nobody can make a comment on his video to explain why he's got things wrong. So quickly looking on Google Earth before we look at Anthony's video. Oops. Let's pause that. Anthony is at St. Bees here in St. Bees Priory Church is there. So Anthony's at St. Bees, which is on the west coast of the UK in the Cumbria region, and he is looking across towards the Isle of Man, and beyond the Isle of Man is the island of Ireland, Northern Ireland here, Lisbon, Belfast, and so on. And up here we have the part of Scotland, Stranraer, and the south west of Scotland. So this is the region that we're talking about. Just zoom out, you see a little bit more detail of where we are. Carlisle, Barrow-in-Furness, Blackpool is down here. So going to Anthony's video, the one thing to note is it's clearly quite low tide here. The sea is quite a long way out, and I don't know how far exactly. I don't have the timing of the when the video was taken. Anthony's location, I accept entirely. He is from where he claims he took the pictures. But you can see that the tide is quite low down here. The high water sort of mark on the rocks and the cliff here, you can see that it's quite a long way out. Anyway, playing Anthony's video, he pans round to look towards the Isle of Man, and we'll stop it there. This is cloud here, and the Isle of Man can just about be made out here underneath the cloud. It's a darker, slightly darker area, and we're going to zoom in on the Isle of Man. And of course, as we zoom in, the Isle of Man becomes larger, occupying more of the effective field of view, or the view that we can see. So Anthony says this is the Isle of Man, and I tried to pause it there and it didn't pause, so I'll just go back a bit. And we'll start zooming in again. Difficult extent of what we can see in a full view. But this here is the highest point, and over here we have the leftmost part that we can make out clearly. It seems to stop about there. Again, this is the highest point is here, and the most right point that we can make out is just here. Now, I haven't captured images and put them into any other program. I'm not particularly skilled at doing that anyway, but this distance from here to here is shorter than this distance, oops, here to here. Okay. Unfortunately it's very hazy, it's very indistinct, but the distance from the leftmost point of the Isle of Man that we can see to the rightmost point that Anthony claims is the rightmost point of the Isle of Man, the distance to the left is greater than the distance to the right from the only landmark that we can really make out, which is the highest point. So as we zoom in, and the camera wobbles around quite a lot, here is the highest point, and there's another lower peak behind that, and there are other peaks here. Okay, and yes, Anthony, this is the Isle of Man. And Anthony pans along to the right, but he doesn't pan along to the left, and he doesn't make any attempt to measure the distance. And we get to here, and Anthony makes the assertion that the Isle of Man stops here. And he provides no evidence to support that. And he's wrong. This is not where the Isle of Man stops. And I'll show you some evidence to back that up. So he then continues to pan, to zoom in a bit more and to pan across. And he sees another piece of land here, and something that is almost certainly a ship or other structure in the sea here. And we'll zoom in probably a bit closer to that in a moment. And he says, what the fuck is this land here? Well, it's part of the Isle of Man, Anthony. And we'll see that in just a moment. And so is the land away to the right-hand side that he missed initially, but he'll catch when he pans back out again in a moment. This is a boat or a ship. And as he pans, okay, he's looking at that same bit of land, and he's now going to zoom out. And as he zooms out, here we go, we get another piece of land, in fact, two pieces of land, one here and another one here, appearing in view. Now, we're still quite far zoomed in at this point. Notice we can't see the other part of the Isle of Man here. And I can't mark on Anthony's video this point here. So we need to sort of keep a vague or a rough idea of where that is in relation to the rest of the island. Arrows on us, but he takes them away. And you can see the rest of the Isle of Man is in view here, but we still haven't got across as far as the highest point. And so the land masses that Anthony has identified, or the bits of land that he can see, end about here. And we can maybe use these clouds as reference, because unfortunately the clouds are not visible in the further zoomed in version. But even if we say that the that land is level with the end of this cloud here. As we continue to pan out, we see the highest point of the Isle of Man is here. Anthony claims this is the end of the Isle of Man, and we can still make out the Isle of Man here on this side. So again, using this point here as a point of reference, and hopefully we'll scroll out, zoom out just a little bit further in a moment. So from here to here is the distance that we're talking about, with the highest point of the island here. So the highest point of the Isle of Man is here. The leftmost end is here. And the bits of land that Anthony claims are island are here, underneath these clouds just here. Now, let's have a little look at the Isle of Man and its shape and its topography. So Anthony, if you recall, is up here in the top right corner off screen, looking across towards the Isle of Man here. The highest point of the Isle of Man is somewhere, I'm not sure if it's on that ridge or here somewhere, but it's in this kind of location. And just above the town of Ramsey on the Isle of Man is a flat area, a very low-lying and flat area of the island. And then there are a few more hills here. They're not as anywhere near as high as these, but they are as high as the some of the hills on this side of the island, which we could also see from Anthony's video. So looking again on Google Earth, you can see the same sort of thing, and you can see here I've marked where the highest point is. So just popping back to the maps thing, the highest point appears to be in this location here. I've marked where the highest point is, and you can see that the distance from the highest point to the most southerly point that we can see from Anthony's viewpoint. You might argue you could see to this peninsula, but this is very low-lying little point here. So really, just south of Douglas is where Anthony can see. The distance from here to here is less than the distance from here to here. It's very easy to see comparing the angles here, that we have a larger angle and a smaller angle. And so the area, the distance from the peak at the highest point to the right-handmost edge of the Isle of Man is, this is smaller and this is larger. If we go back to Anthony's video, and well, let's look here, because we were using these clouds as a guide. The highest point is here. The end of the Isle of Man to the left is here, quarter distance, and this is where Anthony claims the right end of the Isle of Man is. But this distance is shorter than this distance, so this cannot be the end of the Isle of Man. If we're correct that the end of the Isle of Man is somewhere in the region where this cloud ends, then it would indeed be a longer distance from here to here than it is from here to here. Now, I apologize for the fact that it's very difficult to make out exactly the Isle of Man from from Anthony's video. Even if we go back to the early part of his video where he zooms in, it's a little bit indistinct. To make out the highest peak here, you can see here is the leftmost part. This distance must be shorter than the distance to the Isle of Man on the right. And unfortunately, Anthony doesn't capture it all in one shot. He zooms right in and then pans across. And there is where he says the Isle of Man stops. So there's another thing we can do on Google Earth, which is that we can go in and see a street view, or we can actually see a street view from the water. So if I place the little figure here and pan around till we see the Isle of Man, this is what we see. Now, obviously, I'm much closer. I'm effectively doing what Anthony did when he zoomed in. We see the highest point of the Isle of Man here. We see the leftmost part of the island here. And this distance from here to here is shorter than the distance from here to the rightmost point of the Isle of Man that we can see, which is just about there. And you'll notice that the land drops down from our vantage point much closer to the Isle of Man. We can still see the land here, and then it rises up, and there is some more land in this area here. And you can see that the distance from this tallest point to here is less than the distance from this point across to here. And the end of the Isle of Man is actually quite far over. It's difficult to make it out exactly because we're still quite a long way away from the island. Viewing the island from the side, you can see the profile is the same. You can see how the land starts to slope down here, and then it fairly abruptly drops the last 20 or 30 meters. Or actually, it's probably about 50 or 60 meters. It drops quite abruptly down to a very level area, and then and a very low-lying area, and then it rises up again on this side. So just scrolling back out so that we can see that in clear view. I'll just reset the tilt and compass on this. And so that view matches exactly what we would anticipate from here, and reveals exactly why Anthony has got things wrong. I'm going to take some labels off some of the island here, just to show you the change in elevation that occurs on the island. If you look at the elevation reading here on Google Earth, at the highest point here at Snaefell, we're up at 560 meters or thereabouts, and as you move across, the stays relatively high, still over 300 meters, but gradually dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping and dropping until you get to an area just about here where it starts to drop down quite quickly. And you get down to about 20 meters, 14 meters, 10 meters or so. And all the way along here, we're under 25 meters. So all the way through here, we're under 25 meters, 9 meters, 10 meters. Not very high at all. And then at this end of the island, we have some higher peaks. And I think I've marked some of them. So there are hills here which are about 80 meters high. At the locations that I've actually marked them. Hills. There should be another one marked here, but I've there we go. Okay, so this is at 80 meters, and if you get exactly the cursor over the point, it does go up to 80 meters, and the markers may have moved, but if we zoom in, you can see 80 meters there, and here we have 80 meters again. So these place marks, these hills in this area at the north end of the island, match exactly where Anthony sees his extra land masses, and they are in exactly the right place relative to the highest point on the island, and exactly the right place for the view that Anthony actually sees, the image that he actually sees. Now, in the absence of landmarks, if we had a landmark, any landmark here in this region where Anthony sees claims the end of the island is, or a visible landmark here, there is actually a lighthouse here. I'm not sure whether Anthony could see the lighthouse from his location. But if we had some landmarks, we'd be able to pin this down. The only landmark we can really use is Snaefell. There is no landmark for this end of the island. We can simply stop with the first point of land that we see. What we do know, though, is that because the Earth is curved, that low-lying land would disappear below the curve of the Earth, and higher land is visible, and so we would expect the area here to be invisible from St. Bees, and only the taller peaks in this area to be visible at all. And that is exactly what Anthony sees. Anthony's contention that he is seeing part of the island of Ireland doesn't make a lot of sense, because he identifies a peak here which is 1,000 feet. But the question has to be, why are you not seeing any of this area that's well over 150 meters and so on, all the way down here to this peak. This is all this area. This is quite low lying, down at just a few meters above sea level. But at the 60, 70, 80, 90 meters, you should be able to see the whole of this. if the Earth was flat, and this is your contention. It's a far more, or your observation, should we say, fits far better with the explanation that the Earth is a sphere, that the amount of curvature from St. Bees across to the Isle of Man is sufficient at low tide, and from your vantage point on a small, I won't call it a hill, a dune or something like that, your vantage point there at low tide is under conditions at the time is sufficient to see only the 80-meter plus or 80-meter or thereabouts peaks on this north end of the island, plus a large part of the rest of the island, which, as you can see, is even down here near to Douglas, is pretty quickly rises to be well over 50 meters elevation and even to 100. I'll just zoom in on that just to make that point clear. So Anthony can see down, I think, to this sort of point, and you can see already we're at 73 meters right by the coast near Douglas. The island is actually relatively high above sea level. What we would need to be able to pin this down completely is perhaps to take a similar shot at night, and you might be able to see, I don't know if that lighthouse still has a light, but if it does, then you might be able to see that. You certainly should be able to see if the Earth was flat, you should be able to see the lights from Ramsey and maybe the lights from Douglas as well, unless they're hidden behind this hill. But you may have a line of sight through to Douglas, and possibly some other landmarks. Or alternatively, you need to send somebody across to the Isle of Man with a very bright light who can go to various locations, or more than one person, and shine a light back across. As far as you proving that you've seen Ireland from St. Bees, I think you have far from proven that, Anthony. I think it is the evidence suggests very strongly that what you are looking at is still the Isle of Man, that you haven't identified correctly the northern tip of the Isle of Man in your photograph, and the profile that you see when looking from Google Earth further confirms that. So I don't want to waste any more time on this. If Anthony is absolutely convinced that he really has seen the island of Ireland from St. Bees, and he wants to engage in any discussion about it, he's welcome to do so. The only thing I would ask him to do is to actually the evidence accurately and not and honestly, and not to simply deny or ignore the evidence that actually exists. So with that, I will stop this this little live stream, and I've done this private, so I'm hoping that when I make it public, it will appear on my site. So thanks for watching, and if you want to make any comments, my comment section is always available for people to make comments.